want to start with something I noticed at 2:30 in the morning on Saturday, February 28th, 2026, while I was watching live flight tracking data on my second monitor. Dozens of stealth aircraft suddenly vanished from ADS-B feeds over the eastern Mediterranean. If you know what that means, you felt your stomach drop too, because by 6 a.m. the world woke up to something that geopolitical analysts had been predicting, debating, and quietly dreading for the better part of 18 months. The United States and Israel had launched a full-scale military operation against Iran. The Pentagon called it Operation Epic Fury. Over 200 Israeli fighter jets and an unknown number of American B-2 stealth bombers struck targets across 24 of Iran's 31 provinces in a single night. But here's the thing, and this is the argument I'm going to make in this entire video. This attack didn't happen in isolation. It happened at the end of a very deliberate chess game. And the player everyone is still underestimating is Beijing. My thesis today is this. China did not just support Iran with diplomatic words. In the weeks leading up to February 28th, China was actively arming, informing, and positioning Iran for exactly this moment. And what happened in the hours after the strikes began proved it. Let me take you back about 3 weeks before the bombs fell, to a Chinese Foreign Ministry press briefing on a Thursday afternoon. A reporter from Iran's state broadcaster IRIB asked spokeswoman Mao Ning a pointed question. If the United States attacks Iran, will China stand with Tehran? Mao Ning didn't say yes, but what she said was far more significant than a simple yes. She said, and I'm paraphrasing here because the translation matters, that China supports the Iranian government and people in upholding their nation's stability and legitimate rights and interests, and that China firmly opposes the use or threat of force in international relations. Now, I've read Chinese foreign ministry statements for years. That language, stability, legitimate rights, firmly oppose, is not filler. That is Beijing signaling to every defense ministry and intelligence agency in the world. We have chosen. What made it louder was what happened the same day. A Chinese satellite company called Mizar Vision, which several analysts describe as having ties to military-linked firms, published commercial imagery showing 11 American F-22 Raptors sitting on the tarmac at Israel's Ovda Air Base in the southern Negev. Those aircraft had quietly departed from RAF Lakenheath in England just 48 hours earlier. Open-source trackers confirmed the movement. China made sure the world saw it. Think about what that actually means. A Chinese firm in the middle of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks in Geneva published the precise coordinates of America's most advanced stealth fighters. That's not journalism. That is a message. And Tehran received it, but the satellite images were just part of the picture. Reuters reported, citing 6 separate sources with direct knowledge of the negotiations, that Iran was close to finalizing a deal with Beijing to purchase CM-302 supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles. These aren't old Soviet hand-me-downs. The CM-302 flies low, fast, and was specifically designed to evade shipborne defense systems. A former Israeli intelligence officer I came across in the Reuters reporting called it a complete game-changer for Iran's ability to threaten naval vessels in the Persian Gulf. Vessels like, for example, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald Ford, both of which were already in the region. Here's the question I kept asking myself while building out this segment. Why would China risk a direct confrontation with the United States, even an indirect one, over Iran? What is Tehran actually worth to Beijing in 2026? The answer is more concrete than most people realize, and it has almost nothing to do with ideology. According to World Trade Organization data from 2024, Iran imported roughly $18 billion worth of Chinese goods and exported approximately $14.5 billion in return. More than a quarter of Iran's total trade runs through China. But that's not the number that keeps analysts up at night. The number that matters is 13.4%. That is Iran's share of China's seaborne oil imports last year, according to a separate Reuters report. For context, China consumes more oil than any country on Earth. And in a world where the United States just demonstrated in Venezuela, by capturing Maduro and seizing control of his export network, that Washington is willing to reshape who gets access to global energy markets, Beijing cannot afford to watch Tehran fall into the American orbit or collapse entirely. There's also the 25-year Strategic Cooperation Agreement signed in 2021, widely reported as committing up to $400 billion in Chinese investment into Iran's energy. transportation, and infrastructure sectors. Analysts are right to note that implementation has been slow and the figure aspirational. But the architecture of the deal is real. Iran sits at the intersection of Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, connecting Central Asia to the Persian Gulf. Losing that node isn't just a diplomatic embarrassment, it is a strategic amputation. And in 2023, okay, a detail I think is chronically underappreciated in Western coverage, China brokered the diplomatic normalization between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Beijing positioned itself as the region's power broker at a moment when American influence was visibly receding after the chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal. For Xi, the Middle East is no longer someone else's problem. It is his chessboard too. So when we talk about China supporting Iran, we need to be precise. This is not sentiment. This is energy security. This is Belt and Road architecture. This is the geopolitical dividend of years of investment. Odd. And Beijing was not about to watch it get bombed into rubble by Operation Epic Fury. At approximately 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, February 28, 2026, President Trump addressed the nation. The operation had already begun. He said its objective was to eliminate imminent threats from the Iranian regime, specifically targeting Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missile capabilities, and IRGC naval assets. The Israeli Defense Forces reported that some 200 fighter jets executed what they called an extensive attack against Iran's missile array and air defense systems across 24 provinces. Simultaneously, Israeli military intelligence struck two separate sites where Iran's top military brass were assembled, killing an estimated 40 senior commanders in the opening hours, including Iranian Armed Forces Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Abdurrahim Mousavi, according to IDF statements. By Saturday morning, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was dead. Iran's response was immediate and, frankly, larger than most Western analysts expected. The IRGC launched strikes across 27 American military bases spread across the Middle East. 8 countries were hit: Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. U.S. Central Command confirmed by Sunday evening that 3 American soldiers had been killed in action and 5 seriously wounded. Iran's missiles targeted the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet in Bahrain's Jufair area. The Manama International Airport was struck with a drone. By the time the UN Security Council convened in an emergency session on Saturday, China's ambassador Fu Kong described the U.S.-Israeli strikes as brazen and called for Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity to be respected. He called it shocking that the attacks had come in the middle of active diplomatic negotiations. 3 weeks earlier, China was publishing satellite images of American stealth fighters. Now, China's ambassador was standing before the world's most powerful diplomatic body, defending Tehran's right to exist. This is not a coincidence. This is a posture, and it has been building for years. Now, before the conclusion, I want to steelman the opposing view, because it deserves a real answer, not a dismissal. The counter-argument is this: China has not intervened militarily. There are no Chinese soldiers in Iran. The CM-302 missile deal, according to Reuters' own reporting as of late February, had not yet been finalized and had no agreed delivery date. And China's statements at the UN, while pointed, still called on all parties to show restraint, including Iran. A more cautious analyst would say China is doing what it always does, maximizing its moral authority while minimizing its direct exposure, talking loudly, carrying a small stick. I've thought about that argument carefully, and I still disagree with it. Here's why. The reason I disagree with the China is just talking interpretation is the specific combination of actions Beijing took in the weeks before February 28th. Publishing satellite coordinates of American stealth fighters during active nuclear negotiations is not standard diplomatic posturing. Accelerating a supersonic anti-ship missile deal, specifically designed to threaten carriers, while 2 American carrier strike groups are positioned in the region, is not neutral behavior. Hosting Iran's president at a military parade and stating you support Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity months before a massive U.S.-Israeli strike is not coincidence. What China did was build the infrastructure of deterrence for Iran, and the deterrence failed. Not because China didn't try, but because Washington calculated that the window to act was closing. Steve Witkoff said publicly in late February that Iran was roughly a week away from having bomb-making material. Whether or not that intelligence assessment was accurate, it was the pretext used to launch Operation Epic Fury. So here is my prediction, and I want to be honest that this is opinion, not intelligence briefing. The next 60 to 90 days will determine whether this conflict metastasizes into something that directly pulls China in, not militarily, but economically and diplomatically, in ways that permanently reshape the global order. If Tehran survives as a coherent state, even in a diminished form, China will likely accelerate weapons transfers and economic lifelines to whatever government emerges. If Iran fractures and a pro-Western or neutral government takes hold, Beijing loses one of its most important energy suppliers and belt and road nodes simultaneously. The UAE and Saudi Arabia have both refused to allow their territory to be used for strikes against Iran. That's significant. These are American partners effectively telling Washington, this is your war, not ours. And both of them have deepening economic relationships with China. Beijing brokered their reconciliation with Tehran in 2023. They are not going to burn that down to cheer on Operation Epic Fury. China did not fire a single missile this weekend, but make no mistake, Beijing is fighting this war. It's just fighting it in the currency of satellite imagery, arms deals, diplomatic cover, and energy economics. And in the long game, that might matter more than anything that happened over Tehran on February 28th. One final thought. Republican Senator Ted Cruz said in late February that the governments of Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran could all be replaced with U.S.-friendly regimes within 6 months. 3 countries, 3 continents, 3 of Beijing's closest partners. If Washington is serious about that agenda, and this weekend suggests they are, then the question I'll be asking in every video from this point forward is not, will China respond? It's, how long before the response becomes one we can't ignore? Drop your take in the comments. I genuinely read them. And the best ones from this video might end up in the next one. If you've been here since the January analysis on the Geneva talks, you know what I mean. See you in the next one.